Hey everybody, Tech the Fun Guy here. We're back with another painting tutorial. For this, we're going to go with the abherrants from the genestealer cults. Now, I painted the abominant in the past, but for this, we're going to go with the abherrants. So for the abherrants, one of them we do need the base coat with a different base coat for the contrast paint later. You'll see why in a minute. But for this, we're going to base coat one of these with wraithbone. So, you may be asking, why am I going to undercoat it over a white? Well, the reason being is that way, this has more of a deck tan color, which goes well over the flesh contrast paint I'm going to use. So, for this, basically what I'm going to do, take some wraithbone, put on the palette like so, and we are going to thin it down a little bit, just a little bit. Not much, because this is a pretty thin paint, a little more. Perfect. Basically, what we're going to do is going to cover all, you can basically just cover all over this miniature with wraithbone. Now, it will probably require 2 thin coats, but don't worry about it. Just go over the detail. Just take your time. You can try to avoid the clothes if you want, but don't worry, you can just base coat the whole miniature in wraithbone if you want. And also for the weapons, we are going to base coat those in wraithbone. Not the metal parts, but the handles per se. Certain loincloths and stuff like that. Alright, that's the first base coat done. Alright, while we're waiting for the one with the coated in wraithbone to dry, we're going to start off with the other skin tone. Or like that way. So, when we're waiting for the wraithbone to dry, we're going to get started with the first variant that I want to demonstrate. So for this, we're going to use Catachan Flesh. So, check out the paint like so. I just like painting my abherrants like this, like with different variations, because although they are all pale purple like in lore, I just want to paint them like more naturally because I just like it that way. So, take some Catachan Flesh, thin it down onto the palette like so. We are going to need some water, because just to get a smooth base coat, we will need a little more Catachan Flesh, but that's pretty much it. What we're going to do is going to say, take some Catachan Flesh and just base coat it all over the skin of the miniature. Now, this will require 2 thin coats because, you know, we did thin it down a little bit, but that's the good thing. Just take your time and it'll be really worth the effort. Just base coat all over the skin. And if you hear anything going off in the background, that's my TV. That's just a show I'm watching. And while the other base coat is done for right now, we're gonna start base coating the other variant. So basically, what we're gonna do is reason why I did with wraithbone is because I find contrast paints easier doing like for other skin tones such as lighter. So for this, we're gonna use Gilliman Flesh. Shape the contrast paint really good. We're gonna use a bigger brush, that way it has soft bristles, so that way it can deliver the contrast paint well. We're not gonna need much, just some of it, and just put on the palette like so. A little bit of a puddle, but that's pretty good. So what we're going to do, go over these, we're not going to use blobs. Well, you could use blobs in order to get an even finish, but we're basically going to gently dab. Reason why I like the dab technique is that way you can get it in the recesses, but still leave the raised parts, the highlighted stuff you're looking for. Just very gently all over the skin. Alright, with the lighter skin tone now base coated with the contrast paint, we now see we are going to highlight that later. So basically what we're going to do is going to start shading in the other skin tone. So for this we're going to use Agrax Earthshade. So you could of course use Nolan Oil, but I just prefer the Agrax Earthshade because it actually deepens the recesses, gives more detail, but actually doesn't over darken it. So what we're going to do, check out the Agrax Earthshade. So what we're going to do, open up the pot. We're going to do, take some Agrax Earthshade, put it on the palette like so. We won't need much, but we will need a little bit just for, you know. So what we're going to do right here, just coat this all over the skin. So as you can see, it's going into the recesses, but it's also not over darkening the miniature so much. So what we're going to do. And also, if you see any pooling on the flat parts, just soak it up with the brush, and you could just move it somewhere else. Simple. Now, with the Agrax Earthshade now done on this one, we're now going to start layering to highlight. So for this, we're going to go all over the skin with Blood Reaver Flesh. So check out the paint like so. Basically, you just want to highlight the raised areas and not the others. So what we're going to do, you could layer or you could use dry brushing. We're just going to layer over this one just because it's easier. So what we're going to do, if the paint pot could open, basically what we're going to do is take some Blood Reaver Flesh, pot closing again, and now we're going to just put it on the palette and thin it down a little bit. That's all. Basically, what you're trying to do is that you're trying to avoid the recesses, but also highlight the raised areas. Like for right here, you can see there's just a little raised part of muscle right here. That's it. Also all over the arms. If you get any under in the recesses, you could just paint that over in later. See, we're just layering so far. Just layer, layer, layer. And for the head, just go over the top of the head, but when you get to the facial features, you just want to basically just fill in a little bit, but not much. See, like this. This might take 2 thin coats, but don't worry, that's completely normal. A little more water for this part. Alright, now with the Blood Reaver Flesh now applied, we are now going to move on to a finer highlight. Move this paint out of the way, we're going to use Nightquester Flesh. So what we're going to do, check out the Nightquester Flesh. We won't need much, so I'm going to use my fine brush for this. Basically, what we're going to do is going to highlight the edges. So what we're going to do, take some Nightquester Flesh. Might need a good amount right here. Thin it down a little bit. Actually, a little bit more, so that way it flows on nice and smoothly. So basically, we're looking for the finer edges. So what I mean by that is that if you look in the eyes, like right here, some abherrants may have 3 eyes, but if you work really closely, there's ridges right here. There's ridges. Also, do the front of the chin, nose. You can also do the lower part of the jaw, but also just make sure to follow the brow, nose, fill in the edges, right? So it brings more attention. The ear, of course, and that's pretty much it. But also, for the body, what we're going to do is basically, if you go over the fingers, basically what we're going to do is like go over the knuckles, just the knuckles. And don't worry, if you get too much paint, just dot it off. It'll look a lot nicer. So we're going to do also for the toes, like for right here. Just gently swipe over them, wipe off the excess, and there you go, yeah. As you may notice, some of the highlights may be a little bit too thick, but that's completely fine. I'm going to show you how you can fix that. So for this, we're going to go back to Blood Reaver Flesh. Basically, what we're going to do is where we highlighted with the Nightquester Flesh earlier, and where it got too, thick, we're going to, just tidy it back up if this pot will stay open. Take a little bit. Basically, we don't need much, but if you look here, there's a little too thick of a highlight right here. So what we're going to do, we are going to thin this down again just so we can get nice consistency. So what we're going to do, see, look for the part where there's too chunky of a highlight, and then we're just going to paint it back with Blood Reaver Flesh. So that way we can tidy it up without messing it up on the miniature later. Just look for everywhere where there's too chunky of a highlight. Like say for here, for example. There's one like right here, but don't worry, just paint it back with Blood Reaver Flesh. Just be very careful. Alright, and that's the skin tidied. Now for this part, we're going to add an extra fine highlight. Well, it's not too fine, but for this we're going to use Bugman's Glow. So, check out the paint pot like so. Let me make sure mine is still good. Yes, it is. Take some Bugman's Glow. Take some out of the pot, and basically we're going to put some on the palette like so. We don't need much. We are going to thin this down a little bit more because this is a base paint. So what we're going to do, thin it down a little bit more so that, just make sure it goes on more consistently. Perfect. Alright, now what we're going to do, make sure there's no excess on your brush. Basically for this part of the detail, it's got a very, very small highlight. So look, watch this. So around the eyes, just be very careful and steady. Just be very careful and steady. Just only follow the absolute sharper details with Bugman's Glow. Just be very, very careful. As you can see, it's picking up the highlights, but it's also not too big. Just be very, very careful. Just very careful. Alright. You don't have to do the Bugman's Glow. This is more of an optional highlight. I just like adding this to add a little more depth. Just one more even, just one more highlight to it. Thin it down a little bit more. And just go all over. You don't have to do the hands, but if you want to do the hands like I'm doing right now, just barely dot it. Barely, barely, barely dot it. Barely. Also for the toes, just barely dot the toes. And for the pectoral muscles, if you want, just do one little line right here under, and just these little ridges on this side. Be very, very gentle. As you can see, I'm just doing a little bit just to make sure I get the area ready, and then just basically just very, very gentle. Very gentle. And if you see me shaking a little bit, I do have a shaky hand, but try to keep your hand like really, really steady, or you can just take a deep breath and that helps too. Not deep, but you know, just hold your breath. Very, very careful. Very, very careful. All right, and that's this skin tone done. My camera paused for a second, just making sure. Again, 2 thin coats are required just so that you can get a nice smooth finish. Alright, with the Kislev flesh now layered, we're now going to start highlighting the flesh. So for this we're going to use Flayed 1 Flesh. Check out the paint like so. Basically, Flayed 1 Flesh is basically a really other paler skin tone that we're going to use, or skin tone paint. So what we're going to do, take some Flayed 1 Flesh. We don't need much, we're just going to thin this down and start edge highlighting a little bit. Nice thin consistency. Alright, make sure it's not too much on your brush. What we're going to do is that to avoid the Kislev flesh, basically the darker recesses, we're going to highlight the raised areas, like for right here, there's the raised areas right here on the pectoral muscle right here. You can wipe it away a little bit. I am going to thin this down a little bit more so that way it goes more smoothly. And if you look on the abdominal muscles, you couldn't really see it on the other one because it was the positioning. What we're going to do is like right here, gently paint the abdominal muscles. You don't have to edge highlight the abdominal muscles, you can just go over the whole thing. And for this, basically we're going to edge highlight the pectoral muscles, top parts of them. Of course, you can also just dot them away if it gets too much. Add a little more paint. So for the knuckles, we're going to paint the knuckles with the Flayed 1 Flesh. Essentially just nice smooth layers. And also for this, you can go on this part of the skin right here. And for the face, of course, like we did with the other one, just follow the brow, nose, cheekbones if you want, this part of the thing, ears, and basically just follow that. Dot in between just to be sure they're not too overloaded. Just making sure I keep good consistency. And for the back muscles, or like where you just look where the edges are, see right next to the edge, and just gently drag the brush downwards like that, and then, you know, just highlight. Very smooth, and just be very, very gentle. Take your time. And for the other skin tone that we did earlier, you can also add another finer highlight if you're feeling brave enough. After Flayed 1 Flesh is applied, we're going to apply Wraithbone. So, Wraithbone is a very, very pale, so you just want to be very, very careful. So what we're going to do, take this, camera moved just for a second, let me fix that, there we go. Damn it again. Basically what we're going to do is going to take some Wraithbone, thin it down. It is kind of a thin paint out of the pot, but we do need to thin it down a little bit, like lots, because, you know, we just want a smooth finish. So for this, just look for the extra, extra fine parts. Say where the brow we painted with flayed one flesh, just go over it very, very gently and very, very slight, like so. For the knuckles, individually, just like that. For the toes, it's the same thing. And also for the ridges right here, just very, very gentle. Just look for the finer edges and just highlight this with this. Alright, now with the skin now finally done, we're now going to move on to the main details of the abherrants. So for this, we're going to start painting the carapace like I've been doing, like for the past couple of videos. Basically, it's just a very dark blue, and let me make sure I can find it. Here it is. We're going to use Contour Blue. Check with the paint like so. So basically the point of this video, as I said, is just to show some tonal variation, and actually people to actually paint their abherrants with more humanish skin tones anyway. That's the point. Contour Blue, thin it down with some water. Basically what you're going to do is going to basically just look for all the parts where there's carapace. Avoid the flesh at any cost possible. And also for the abherrants, there's also ones on their spine right here. They have little spine bumps right here. With the carapace now base coated, we are now going to focus on some of the bone details that we might see. So for the bone details, there's a skull in this one's hand. But for the teeth, we're gonna paint with Screaming Skull. So check out the Screaming Skull like so. I have my fine brush because the teeth are very small. So what we're going to do, take some Screaming Skull, put it right here. And if you look, just look for the individual teeth. Just be very careful, not much paint, which as you can see, it might be a little difficult, but watch this. Just dot in the teeth, just dot in the teeth. Just dot in the teeth. That's this one. And for this one, there may be some jaw distortion. You know what I mean? Because like these creatures are mutants for the genestealer cults, but don't worry, just paint the individual teeth. Alright, that's the teeth painted. And for the skull that this one is holding, we're going to use a base coat of something different. We're going to use Morgoth's Bone. So what we're going to do, check out the paint like so. I'm going to use Morgoth's Bone so that way I can start off with the lighter base coat, and then we're going to highlight the skull later with something brighter. Thin it down a little bit. So look for the skull. Be very careful not to hit the hands of this one. But don't worry, just basically, yeah. Now this is the first base coat, so we are going to need 2 thin coats in order for it to dry properly. with the skull now dry, we are now going to focus on painting the eyes of the abherrants. For this, we're going to use a very bright yellow. We're going to use Phallix yellow. We're going to say, so what we're going to do, take some Phallix yellow from the Potlight show. What we're going to do, this is thinned down a little bit, my goodness. So basically what we're going to do, not very much. So what are you going to do, just look for the eyes. Like this one has 3, so just dot them in. They're easy to see, just dot them in. Just dotting this one away and just filling it back in. Okay, there's that. And then for the other one, just the same technique. And the eyes are completely optional on the miniature, but this is basically the eyes done. Alright, and last details on the head is that there may be some parts of the tongue which are actually showing. So for the tongue, basically we're just going to use a very nice base coat. For this, basically all we're going to do, we're going to use Impish Rouge. So what we're going to do, check out the bottle like so. You don't need much, just a little bit, just so you can get nice coverage. So what we're going to do, take this right here. So basically just look for where the tongue is and just paint it in. And if you don't want to use pink, that's completely fine. You can paint the tongue however you wish, but I highly recommend keeping it with Bugman's Glow or some sort of pinkish or burgundy tone. Alright, that's the tongue painted. Now we're going to work on the other details, which are the feet. So basically this one has claws on its feet for the 1 foot. We're going to use Abaddon Black. So for this, take some Abaddon Black. We're going to use this on our fine brush just in case. Basically what we're going to do is pin down some Abaddon Black. And basically what we're going to do is if you look right here, just follow the claws where we're on the feet on this foot right here. And as I said, like for the weapons, just paint the weapon handles with Abaddon Black. Just be very careful not to get any on the skin. And for the toenails on some of the models, we are basically going to do like a nice little base coat of Flayed One Flesh. You could of course use other tones if you wish. I'm just using Flayed One Flesh because it has the sort of bonish color. So what we're going to do, just dot in the toenails, just dots. Toenails are optional, but I just like to add them in just in case because I actually like this. There's no fingernails, it's just regular claws. And also this for the same thing. He has claws on his arm right here, but also just the toenails real quick. Alright, that's the feet done. And now we're going to focus on the base coating the metallics for right now. So for this, basically, we're going to use a nice little base coat of Lead Belcher. So what we're going to do, check out the Lead Belcher. This is a medium silver. You can use a brighter base coat like Iron Hand Steel and then darken it down. Or you can go with a really darker silver like Iron Warriors, but I'm just using Lead Belcher for this. Now there are some other silver details like this chain right here that he has right here on his loincloth. And also, just make sure you also paint in the pickaxes of the weapons as well. It may take 2 thin coats, but don't worry if you do. But don't worry about that. Just take your time. I just like holding it upside down for the other side, so that way I can see better. And for the clothing, while we're in for the metallics to dry for right now, we're going to use Incubi Darkness. Now the reason why I'm using Incubi Darkness is that the genestealer paint scheme I'm going for is for the Twisted Helix. So they mostly have green clothing and green armor panels. So what we're going to do for this, just look for the pants like so, and just base coat. Just try and be very, very careful not to get any on the skin. And now for the armor panels on some of the loincloths, like what you might see later. Basically, all we're going to do is going to paint those in with the lighter green. We're going to use Kabalite green. So what we're going to do, shake it the paint like so. This is a little thin, so I do need to be careful where I place it. Basically, see, like there's a little armor panel right here. You can barely see it on the camera. But basically, I'm just going to paint that whole thing in with Kabalite green, basically. That's it. Alright, and that's the Kabalite green applied, actually. Alright, with those details now painted, now we can finally start the shading. So for this, basically, for the silver, carapace, and clothing, and if you want to do the skull, but I recommend not doing that, we're going to use Nuln Oil. So, shake up the Nuln Oil like so. So, shake up the Nuln Oil like so. Basically, what we're going to do is very simple. Get a nice little puddle right here. We're going to shade all over where you want the Nuln Oil to be for these details. So for this, we're going to go over the pants, the carapace, and the silver. Now, if you want to use Agrax Earthshade on the metal, you feel free. Oops. Feel free. Just making sure there's no metallic flakes in my wash, or else that can really be bad. And if you want, you can also add to the black details as well, just to give a little bit of extra definition. Now with the Nuln Oil applied, we are now going to add a different wash of Agrax Earthshade. So Agrax Earthshade is basically a brown wash. Let me get the other model on the camera. Basically, what we're going to do is that you can also put this on some of the silver to make it a little more dirty, because the genestealer cults are an undercover mining community. But for the Agrax Earthshade, I like to use Seraphim Sepia for bone, but for this we're going to do something different. For the skull, just coat it all over with Agrax Earthshade. And for the Agrax Earthshade right here, look for the pickaxe. We're just going to go all over the pickaxe, like right here, to let me get a little more dirty. There we go. See? A little more dirty. And I'm just doing it on the front parts for right now, just so you could see which details would have more grime on it, basically. I just like to do it on the head of the axe, so that way it looks a little more grimy, because it's actually the axe head that's hitting dirt and not the handle. You could, of course, use on the nails as well if you want, and yeah. Now it's time to start highlighting. For this, we're going to use my fine brush again. For this, basically, we're going to go with we're going to start highlighting the carapace. So for the carapace, I like to use like a little bit brighter tone. But for this, basically, we're going to go with the nice and simple one. So for this, we're going to go with Kalador Sky. So what we're going to do, take some Kalador Sky, shake it up out of the pot like so. We're not going to apply this all over the miniature. All we're going to do is going to start at edge highlighting on the carapace. So what we're going to do, take some basically Kalador Sky. We are going to thin this down a little bit, or actually quite a little bit. So what we're going to do, take the edge of your brush, basically just look for the edges of the carapace like right here. Just be very, very gentle and take your time. Little ridges right here you might want to paint it with, and that's pretty much it. Just don't add too much of this, or else it'll over brighten and not look right on your abherrants. Just highlight the finer edges. And for the spine ones, you can just go over the edges, but you can also go flat, but I'm just going to go over the edges so that way it looks cohesive. And there also one on his chest right here. I forgot to get them earlier, but yeah, just highlight those as well. Actually, wait. Same technique for this one. And with my fine brush again, we're going to start highlighting the skull. So for the skull, basically we're just going to apply Screaming Skull. What we're going to do, basically we're going to grab the mini with the skull. We are going to need a fine brush, thin this down a smidge, but not too much. Basically what you're going to do is in gentle strokes, just might take 2 thin coats, but over the raised parts of the skull. So pretty much everywhere all over the skull except for the brows and ridges. So what do you mean? Like for the brow bone, like right here. And leave those eye sockets, any other stuff to do a darker color. But basically what we're going to do is going to, just layer this all over the skull. That's the skull done. Now for the pants, we're going to focus on the little armor panel on this guy's loincloth. So we're just going to use highlight of Cyberite Green. So we don't need Cabalite Green because we just need the Cyberite. So we're basically Cyberite Green. You can barely see it like on the camera, but from the panel line right here, there's a little line along the panel right here. It's part of his loincloth, and we're basically just going to highlight that a little bit with this fine brush. There we go, and that's that. And we're just going to give a nice little brighter finish to the silver. So basically, all we're going to use is a highlight of Stormhost Silver. So shake that up like so. You could, of course, leave the metal as shiny or dirty as you want it. I just want to add this a little bit just to give a nice little chipping effect. By chipping effect, basically, like see right here, where it's like right here, just highlight along the edges right here of the pickaxe, like right here. We're going to add minor dents and scratches. See? Like so. Also for this one right here, same thing. Basically, just take some Stormhost Silver. Basically what we're going to do is this. You can also highlight along the edges, and you can also give a little bit of scratching. See? Little dents. Alright, that's the silver done. Now finally for the pants, we're going to dry brush the pants just to make sure to give a nice easy highlight. So for this I'm going to grab my makeup or dry brush, and we're also going to basically just take some Cabalite Green. So check out the Cabalite Green. So what we're going to do is this, take some Cabalite Green on this dry brush right here, and like how I do it in the past, basically, or all the time, you basically take a little bit of paint and just wipe most of it off on the paper towel or tissue paper, and you just work it in the bristles and just flick it very lightly. So what I mean by this is that go into the pants, and just the pants, it's mostly the back side that you can see, but basically just gentle round strokes on the pants, just gentle. You could try to do the front. The front will be very difficult, but don't worry, just take your time. And be very careful not to hit any of the skin. Basically, that's all. Alright, that's this one's pants highlighted. And now for the other one, basically just the same thing. Gonna grab a little more paint and then dry brush it off again. And in this case, less is more. You don't want too much paint, but you also want just enough to where you can actually see the highlight on the miniature. Alright, and that's the pants highlighted. And now for the final part, we're going to add an extra highlight to the pants using Cyberite Green. So what we're going to do, check out the paint. We're going to use the dry brush technique again. Take some on the brush. Wipe most of it off on a paper towel. And for this one, you're going to want to be a little bit lighter because this is a little bit of a lighter color. Basically what we're going to do, make sure there's no streaks, and just a little more gentle. Just very, very gentle. See? As you can see, even though I'm being gentle, it's still picking up the raised details on the pants. See? There we go. And basically for the other one as well. Oh wait, you can kind of see it. There we go. And for the other one too, basically the same thing again. So All right, and that's the pants done. All right, and that's the abherrants finally done. So as you can see, we tried out two different skin tones for the miniatures, and this is actually my way of painting abherrants. So you could of course use the darker purple, the pale purple gray that I did for the abominant in the past video, but I like to do some of these as well. So for right here, yeah, that's basically it. However, there are other examples. This one basically has more carapace on it because that is the hypermorph. Basically it has the tail, the back, and just more carapace on his arms a little bit. And basically, there's also the two-handed variant, which as you can see right here, some of them may have joint and stuff like that, but don't worry, same techniques apply, just on a different weapon. So, again, I really hope you enjoyed watching today this tutorial on how to paint your abherrants for the genestealer cults. And I really hope you have fun painting your miniatures. Happy painting! Bye-bye!